He's Howard Eibach, a former copywriter and creative director and the author of two books on the creative brief.
And he's Henry Gomez, an ad agency strategist with 28 years of experience. Together, Henry and I are the Brief Brothers. We love talking about advertising, creative briefs, and briefing. We're back with another episode, Henry. Today we have an old friend coming back to talk about his book. His name is Reid Holmes. He's calling in from Minneapolis. He'll tell us more. Let's join the conversation. All right, Henry, we're back. Today we have an old friend coming back for a return visit. And he has a book that he wants to tell us about. His name is Reid Holmes. He is the Grand Poobah and Imperator and founder and CEO of his own concern called the House of Homes. Reid, who is my former boss at Campbell Mithun, and it's not my fault that the shop folded. I mean, maybe it's your fault.
Not mine either.
Welcome back to the Brief Brothers. We're delighted to have you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me back. I feel like this was the one that I should have waited to do, because last time you were like, I know you're working on a book, but let's just talk. And so I feel like it was a disaster, but oh well, here I am. Now I know what I'm talking about.
Wouldn't be the first disaster we had. And
yeah, and since we only have about 17 viewers, how big of a disaster could it be, So we are going to talk about your book, but we'd like to give our viewers a chance to get to know you or get to know you again, to remind them of who you are and what you've been doing in our business. You've been around a long time, and you've had some huge impact on some very important brands. And I had the benefit of getting the chance to work for you while I was freelancing at Campbell Mithun, 2007, 2008, a couple of seasons of H&R Block, when you had a brilliant campaign, which you can talk about, as you go through your history. So tell us, how did you find your way to advertising, and give us a brief trajectory of your career?
Well, it's interesting. My mother was a copywriter in the 50s. She was the rare female who worked at an agency called Simons Michelson in the Detroit area. And interesting story, she met my dad because of advertising. My dad was in broadcasting. He was a floor manager at WXYZ in Detroit. And she was doing peanut butter commercials for Simons Michelson, and she would bring a case of peanut butter because all the commercials were live, and she would she wrote the copy, but she also announced it and spread the peanut butter on the bread. And of course, as soon as you've done one take with that jar, the jar is no longer usable because you can't get the open and all that. And it turns out my dad was a big fan of peanut butter. So she got wind of that, and she would bring him the jars that were just going to get thrown away. And that's how they met. And that's why I'm here. So there's a bit of advertising provenance to my existence. And so knowing that she did that for a living, and her brother, my uncle, did that to great success as a living. One day, in fact, he was working, he worked in Detroit for a number of years. He worked in Australia. He worked in New York. He worked at Y&R in Detroit on Chrysler during a period of time where I felt it appropriate to ask him the question, did you approve the term rich Corinthian leather? And his response was, worse. No, he said, oh, damn it, I blew it. Did you write rich Corinthian leather? And he said, worse, I approved it. So, he was there.
Ricardo Montalban.
Yes.
Yeah, I blew that one. But anyway, I was young then. I was probably 10 or 12, and we were visiting him in his Rochester home, which had a driveway that was a half a mile long and this big pool and this big outdoor grill. And I was like, what does this guy do again? Like, how does, and he was well compensated back in those days in the 70s and 80s. There was a lot of margin in the ad agency business. Anyway, so that was what inspired me. And then I was in college, and I was thinking, okay, I got to go out and find a way to do something that I want to do and is fun and makes me money. So I landed on being a copywriter. So,
well, I want to unpack that a little bit. I became a copywriter too, but I kind of backed into it because I didn't know what else to do. I didn't know how to do anything other. My writing was my skill. What was it about being a copywriter that appealed to you?
I had a lot of positive feedback during my education on how I wrote and writed. So I thought, you know what? I've been told I do this pretty good. I took journalism classes, and I got yelled at for not doing the who, what, where, when, why, how in the first pair, and I'm like, but it's boring, you know. So the
Hunter
journal
S. Thompson is thanking you from his grave.
but thankfully those credits transferred because the advertising school was in the journalism part of the journalism school. This is at Michigan State, and so I was able to get my degree in advertising and marketing, and then I spent a year waiting tables, put my book together, and hit the pavement in Chicago, and eventually got my first job at Ogilvy. So and my
Good
first
training ground.
yeah, and I worked. My first year was writing radio spots for Sears, and it was grueling because they would give you a radio assignment, and they'd only give you 2 weeks to do it. So, and of course, as creatives, we're like, "Come on, I need more time than 2 weeks. Come on." Of course,
2 weeks,
now
2 weeks
2 minutes.
today would get you. Yeah, I mean, 2 weeks today would be like, oh my God, what's wrong? Am
Oh yeah,
I?
it's an eternity. Yeah. So, so anyway, that was a good training ground for writing. And then from Ogilvy, and I did a couple TV spots. I won my first prize at Ogilvy for a TV spot for Kenmore Appliances, and then I was voluntold out of that place because I think I was too uppity
Wait a minute,
about.
wait. Voluntold. I don't want to let that one
Yeah,
fly by. Henry smiled. I said, oh, did I miss something?
yes, it means he didn't quite volunteer. He was told to leave.
Yes.
Voluntold. That's what I thought
Yeah.
I heard. I just want to make
Yeah.
sure. That's clever. I like that. You
Um,
should be a
yeah,
writer, Reid.
I was laid off. I was the last one in, so probably the first one out, and then I ended up at Donor in Michigan, which I would call unsupervised recreation. It was just they had a wall of briefs, pick a brief you like, go tell the account guy you want to work on it. And he had some people assigned to it, but they
They,
always left it, whoever's got the best idea.
they were a big car agency too, right?
I was going to say,
No,
which car? I mean,
actually,
how many?
Their
Every brief is for
history was
cars.
retail, all
Mm,
retail. They were
mm.
all about, in fact, they're the ones, they used to call it the donor tag because they're the ones that invented the 5-second tag for retail ads. And but they did great work. I mean, they just, for years, they were killing it. They were the creative agency in the Detroit area. And they didn't have a car until after I left. I left there in 96 to come to Minneapolis. And actually, the CCO called me like 3 months later saying, "Hey, we just won Mazda. Do you want to come back?" And of course,
That's what it was. It was
yeah,
Mazda. But of course, that 96 is when I got into the business. So that's
yeah,
why I think of Donor and I think of Mazda. Yeah.
yeah. Anyway, I had met a girl, so I didn't want to go back. But anyway, so I've been here. I was at CM for 18 years, which is longer than I thought I'd ever last in the business, let alone one agency. And then, of course, the business partner who I worked with, Steve Wernberg, a lot, and then the lead planner, Lynn Franz, the three of us would always go off and pitch business, and we had pretty good luck with it. I'd say we won more than half. And then that included Block, it included Frontier Communications, included Key Bank, it included Mayo Clinic, Burger King. So we did
Toro.
pretty good. But then the keepers in New York, McCann World Group, who CM was reporting to, they had this new guy come in who just did not jive with Steve. So Steve was just not into going there to kiss the ring and drop off the duffel bag of cash every month. And what he was just like, I'm done with these guys. So so he left, and of course that means they had to find a new CEO. They found a new CEO. He didn't necessarily know what he was doing. I think he wanted to turn the agency into an agency that none of the clients were there to have it be. And I think he didn't understand that people don't hire agencies, they hire teams, and they may happen to work for an agency, and that agency name might be compelling. But at the end of the day, agencies or clients hire teams, and he just started firing teams. He just started firing all these people, and including me, who my main client at Toro, I ran Toro for many years. He called me up one day and said, "Hey, let's go grab a beer." And I'm like, "Sure, yeah, let's go grab a beer." So we go grab a beer, and he's like, "What's going on over there?" And I said, I don't know. I haven't been there for 6 months. He's like, they let you go? And like, he's like, they never even told him. So it became quite a shit show over there. And I was glad to have left because I was kind of toast. Meant I was just a crispy cornflake after 18 years of really trying to do great work in what probably is admittedly not, a well-known kind of you know, aviary of creativity. So anyway.
But you worked on so you did some I think some brilliant work, Reed. Let's not forget that the work you did for H&R Block, the work you did for Toro. I mean, it won some awards and won some recognition in the industry. That's nothing to sneeze at.
Oh, without question. It's I'm very proud of it, but I think because the agency was seen as this old dumb agency in Minnesota and all the other agencies, the Fallons, the Carmichaels, the Martin Williams, they were all by comparison just killing it and not as big in terms of a creative kudos and awards. So here I am one year, the only agency, the only creative director in the Twin Cities to win a one show pencil in 2008, and no other agency in Minnesota did. But it just goes right by. People just don't. They don't.
Mm.
It doesn't register. So that was some
Well,
lessons to me because I was really trying to help it become a better place. I think I did in many ways. I mean, that H&R Block campaign is a great example where, I was
yeah,
just kind of, creativity is kind of like gardening, you just have to kind of plant things here and there and keep tending to them, and hopefully they grow up into these robust, wonderful ideas. And that
I
idea that
like
I pitched was one of those.
I like to tell this story. I mean, it's not my campaign to claim. I claim that I worked on it and did some of the best work of my career working with you and some of your brilliant creatives. I was doing
That's
all the
really
direct
nice. Thank
marketing,
you.
doing all the direct marketing. Me and David Hodges were doing direct marketing to support that work. But I like to tell the story that when Campbell Mithun lost the business and it went to, was it DDB in Chicago?
Yes.
And help me out here because I might get some of these details wrong, but your brilliant campaign idea, we got people or I got people, was,
You got people, yeah.
yeah, you got people, was kiboshed because someone in the family of a senior marketer at H&R Block was a school teacher and objected to the bad grammar of the line. Do you remember that? Am I
That's
getting the story
that's not
right?
quite that's not quite accurate. On year three, the new CEO came in, and that campaign was going into year three and had driven 10% growth the previous 2 years. And I can say that with great confidence because they didn't change a damn thing except that campaign, and that's where the growth came from, was the way they marketed themselves. So you got people, and I can tell you a little bit about the origins of appreciated branding, which kind of comes from that era. But yeah, so he came in and he said, and I can't remember his name, but he was the new CEO, and he came in and said, it should be you've got people. So I'm just like, really? Like, it's been running for 2 years. No one's complaining. It's colloquial. It's like a Seinfeldism, no one makes them change yada 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 to, et cetera, whatever. And it's like so stupid. But they made us do it. So we did it. And it still ran that year and it did great. But what happened is, and the reason that they hired DDB is because a very highly paid consultant, um, who was famous for having led McDonald's toward the phrase "I'm loving it" through a German agency, which then became the global campaign for McDonald's and has been ever since. I mean, talk about an innocuous kind of phrase that just kind of, I think it's the jingle probably is more recognizable, but whatever. Um, so he came in and he said, "You guys are getting this all wrong. The whole problem with taxes is people are afraid they're not going to get it right." And so he literally said, "You guys got to do the campaign with the tagline 'Get it right.'" And we knew, we'd all worked on the brand. We'd all worked in taxes. We all knew that that's kind of table stakes. That's like Chevy saying our cars start. It's kind of like It's so absurd that you would have to advertise the category, which is essentially, you know, accurate taxes, you know. Um, the best campaigns, as you guys know, and as most people know, aren't just doing the expected and rational. They are adding something uniquely emotional and unexpected that adds a bit of delight and a bit of, oh, they get me. They understand me. And
So,
so that's
so
what, yeah,
yeah,
that's how, so they ended up giving the account to DEB.
I
Sales
think
went
it's
down
I think
to
it's
the floor.
incredibly ironic. I mean, I worked myself on Block. I would say this was 2016, maybe 15, 16. A couple of tax seasons on the Hispanic side. So, well, I was at a Hispanic agency, and the I've got people, right? Or you've got people, or you got people,
You got people.
you got people, to be precise, speaks to what the equity of H&R Block was, which was preparers. In a moment where people were moving more and more towards self-preparation, so by going away from you got people, it basically walked away from the brand equity, and the one compelling thing would be that there's a human being who does this a lot, who's going to be doing it for you, so that they do get it right. You know, because if you do it on your own, you could very much get it wrong, even with all the sophisticated tools and all that. So I just think it's ironic that at that moment where, you know, they were facing or they were about to face pressure from the TurboTaxes of the world in a way that they had not before, they walked away from the equity, which was like live humans helping you with your taxes.
Yeah, you know, that's one of the reasons that campaign was so well. I mean, when we presented it in the new business pitch, my first new business pitch, and I never had more fun. You know, it's great when you're done and you're just in the men's room and all these clients who are in the meeting are coming by going, wow, that's really great. That's really, you know, you kind of feel like, oh, we might have this one, you know, which for an incumbent, because that account was at the agency for a number of years before I was asked to help and work on it, is really rare. And not only that, the idea we pitched, they wanted to produce, and we produced it and we ran it for 3 years. The reason that that idea worked so well is it just I mean, I would call it a shock 'em with the truth idea. So you've got all these disruptors coming in. You know, TurboTax in 2006 was coming in. It was still buy it in the box. There was no online kind of stuff. Although there were online tools for doing taxes, but they're nowhere near as robust as they are today. But still, they were competitors. And when we said you got people, we didn't just say we've got 70,000 pros in the strip mall, any of whom might know how to fix your problem. We said if you use an online platform and something goes wrong, you've got you've got a throat to choke, so to speak. And if you use the software and it doesn't quite work, and we even did a spot on this, Howard, you might remember, where a husband and wife are talking, and he's like, "There's a problem with the taxes," and she says, "What don't we have people?" And he says, "No, we've got a box," and he's holding up the box.
I do remember that. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's clever. I
and
remember the spot. Yeah,
that
yeah,
thing killed in
yeah.
terms of like, in the marketplace. But that was, I mean, to your point, Henry, that was, it was kind of a triangular kind of idea that sat in the middle of all these other delivery systems for the business. And yeah, I don't think, I mean, when you get these consultants that come in and think they know the answer without even kicking the tires and trying to figure out what's going on, it's a disaster. It can be a big disaster. And it
I've
was,
Yeah.
seen that.
sales went down.
I've seen that so many times. A new CMO comes in, and really, I think the job of a new CMO that's coming from outside the category, is to do a 6 month listening tour,
Yeah.
and really immerse and talk to all the stakeholders and have those come to Jesus meetings where the stakeholders can feel free to really say what's wrong with the business, and then let that CMO percolate on it, and then figure out if they're good, if they're worth their weight, they will prioritize and say, okay, of everything that I heard, these are the most critical things. But you know, we live in a time where everything's got to be yesterday, and the CMO ain't going to be around for more than 24, 36 months anyway, so who's got time for a 6 month listening tour through the whole business? But yeah, that's
Yeah.
my
I think
take on
Reid,
it.
you said in your book it's down to 18 months. Was that a Forbes
I
a
think
Forbes quote?
I've seen 18 months. I think I put 2 years in the book, but
Yeah.
it's just not, it's not that
I
long.
I want to loop back to something that you were talking for just a half a second when you were describing your career trajectory when you were a Donner. And this I think connects to the power of this line that you created for Block, H&R Block. You got people. You said that Donner was the master of that 5 second tag. And we haven't had many discussions on our podcast. We've had one or two about do taglines, and I know this is not it's not literal.
No, he's talking about retail tags, like
I'm
I
talking about
know.
the
for the
yeah, the 5 second tag. Donor was famous for saying you can't charge us the union can't charge for a whole other spot. It's only 5 seconds. So
Right, but it's about a very quick message.
right, right.
Right? It's that 5 second close. So
Hmm.
it's not precisely a tagline the way you and I understand it, but it's the concept is similar. Would you agree?
Well, I mean, if you, what you mean is that you have a short amount of time to make an impression about something or to activate people to think about something. I mean, yeah, but mostly those retail tags are right now 0% financing for the next 10, or whatever. It's that
it was an
quick.
offer,
Okay.
whatever
Yeah, and
the
for a
offer
spot that's going
of the
to,
moment.
Yeah.
it's an
What I'm
offer. Yeah.
what I'm trying to, and maybe I'm not doing this very well or very elegantly, what I'm trying to loop the conversation back to though is the power of the tagline. And even
Yeah.
though you got people isn't a classic tagline, it played that role. And
It did.
this discussion has come up a couple of places I've seen. Is the tagline still valuable today, given the segmentation of the communications we have? Does it work on social? Is it valuable? People, especially younger people, even remembering them? And there's a value to having a tagline. So, okay, forget about what Donner's contribution. I want to just connect it to the power of this line that I remember so well, and it was a great campaign for H&R Block. Do you have any thoughts
Yes,
on the role of the tagline in branding today?
absolutely. Taglines uh, often are ignored or fly right by consumers. But the main power for a tagline is organizational. The internal audiences know what they've signed up for, what they're there for. Um, the ideas help. An idea like that helps the deciders for a business figure out whether some new thing is relevant to their offering in the marketplace. So, as an internal kind of doorway to go through, that cuts out a lot of irrelevant crap because that's not really what we stand for. We stand for this. Taglines can be incredibly powerful for these internal audiences, particularly big organizations who see them. Let's talk about we bring good things to life, right? That was
Mhm.
GE.
Gee,
Gee,
You're an employee of GE and you want to feel good about that job, and GE wants to be able to hire people who want to be on the good side of creating things and products and whatever. That will go a long way to a company saying to the people that it wants to hire or the people that it already works with, this is our goal. We want to do good things for people. That means a lot. And I think a lot of people ignore the power of that at their peril. But I also have to say that you can't just pick a set of words if they're not really true to the offering of the company. You got people, it's not going to go down as the we try harder of taxes, but it certainly captures the spirit of the company in a new and fresh way.
well, I would say that because no, you're right. It won't go down as the we try harder because it's been abandoned. But if they'd stuck
Yes,
with
right.
it the
yeah,
way Nike stuck
yeah.
with, and the way BMW was stuck for 50 years with the Ultimate Driving Machine, now it's something that everybody owns. It's on the tip of their lips. It's what Byron Sharp would call, a distinctive brand element.
Yeah,
I,
yeah.
I would I so
Asset. Yeah.
here's my take
Yeah,
on it.
essay.
It's like it's like advertising itself. Most of it is garbage, but on occasion when you come up with a good tagline, it can be very valuable. It can really solidify in people's minds what the brand is about, instantly take them someplace mentally, and it can be used in different contexts in a surprising way that then is attributed to. So I think of it just like a microcosm of advertising. Most of them are bad, and yes, just through repetition, like you mentioned the McDonald's one, and I agree. And I worked on McDonald's for 5 years. There's nothing really magical about the tagline, except that they've been repeating it for 20 years, and so people
And the da 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 da, yeah.
now the sound mnemonic, when that's a whole other topic, but that
Right.
certainly is something that they've had fun with. They make fun of it sometimes in the commercials, and they've presented it in different ways so that it's always fresh. And when you hear that, you automatically know that it's McDonald's and nobody else. So
Yeah.
that's my take on
Well,
taglines.
I can tell you, Howard, as someone whose life's work now is about briefs and about inspiring creative people, as far as this tagline goes, the kind of the value proposition or the strategic kind of reason they exist as that we worked against to come up with this idea was one that I don't sit there going, okay, does this deserve a tagline? And I can tell you what that phrase was. The statement that they gave us to work from was H&R Block is the advocate for the middle American financial outsider. And that's what gave birth to us. We just asked the question, well, what does the insider have that the outsider wants? And it's people to take care of it, someone to
An
come in.
expert that they hire and pay,
Yeah,
and
someone they can hire out. And particularly if you don't have a lot of money, the idea that you can hire someone out to do your financial stuff, even if it's just taxes, is pretty damn compelling. And sorry,
I love that. Let me just ask you a question about that. Was that the objective of the brief, or was that the proposition of the brief?
that
Do
was
you
the
recall?
proposition. That was
Okay. How would you define that proposition? Would you say it was clear or inspiring?
I would say it was both.
Okay.
I would
Because
say it was
Henry
very
and I talk about
clearly.
this a lot.
Well, here's the thing. You look at that statement and your first question is like, well, who else could say that? Like, who else could say for the middle American financial outsider, who has the scale and size to be able to say something like that, or aspire to that vision for themselves? And there wasn't anybody else. There was some online companies. I think there was, I can't remember the name of it, but at the time there were like two other kind of strip mall tax prepper guys. One was the guys that Colonial Tax or something, where the guys are out on the street with the flipping the signs or whatever. And then the other one was there was another
H&R
one.
Block pretty much owned the market. It really
Yeah.
did.
they were the big player in like
Yeah.
the big,
Yeah.
like you said, strip mall tax prep.
Yeah. But that doesn't mean they can't take ownership of a really big, juicy proposition, a really big, juicy
But
position.
to Howard's point, we have this ongoing discussion about briefs, and there a lot of strategists get like all they get paralyzed by the idea of making it inspiring. And I say I always want it to be inspiring, but my goal is for it to be clear. So if my brief is clear, I've done my job. If it's clear and inspiring, that's like a bonus. And I think to your point, what you were describing was clear and inspiring. And to me, what makes it inspiring is, and it goes to show you, and you're as a copywriter, both of you as copywriters, I think would agree, is the power of words. That word outsider is very evocative because it creates in your mind this idea of outsiders versus insiders, people that have they have an inside, they have they basically have a shortcut. They're not out here working like we are. And it creates this kind of dichotomy. And then the campaign is like these outsiders talking as if they were insiders, right? They say, I got people for that.
Right.
So suddenly it's like this middle American guy I got people for that.
Yeah.
And that's I think the magic in it is that contrast between an outsider and an insider, and there is inspiration there, but it's also very clear.
Well, let me help you crystallize that a little bit more, because this is something I've spent a lot of time thinking about, and part of this is probably somewhat inspired by Howard's writings, but um, the best statements on a brief have tension in them. They have tension that needs to be relieved. And what you're talking about is outsider. That provided that tension, because when you relieve the tension, the brand gets the credit for being that solution. And it's the same for if you're doing a TV spot or a print or whatever. Like, how are you going to be the answer to the tension that is in the air that no one else has claimed or noticed?
There's
And
there's an interesting aspect to this whole story too. I think that it's worth mentioning, since we've gone down this H&R Block rabbit hole, is that H&R Block is headquartered in Kansas City, and you guys were where, in Minneapolis.
yeah,
So I mean, there's a what I think is instructive about that is kind of this Midwest flyover country, where I don't think that the coastal agencies were ever going to get it. Like, and they're not going to understand a brand like H&R Block, and they're not going to understand the mass market audience that an H&R Block has. And I think that misunderstanding, or that lack of empathy toward a lot of Americans, has played out in subsequent years through marketing, through politics, through all kinds of domains of life. And to me, it just speaks about, like, fundamentally, a lot of agencies are failing to recognize, who the customers and the consumers are out there.
yeah, I don't disagree at all. In fact, I can tell you that when we pitched Block, and we can get off this subject, but after we were told we won, the main client, who's still a friend to this day, said, "You're never going to believe some of the ideas these guys, this New York DDB, or I think it was New York Deutsch, pitched." And it was absurd, some of the ideas that they showed. And so I think, you think about it too, if you're a client and you're in a review, you're praying that someone freaking gets it right. Like, the last thing you need is 5 agencies, all of whom fail, because then you're destined for, suckland. And that's just not where you want to be. So we were forever thanked for having gotten that. And the reason I bring this up too, and the reason it's really germane to this,
Yeah,
And that's
let's
what I want
get
to
back.
segue to.
is and because you guys don't have the book, I have to slut myself out and hold it up.
No worries.
But,
I can hold up the PDF, but yours is prettier.
um, one day, 3 weeks after this campaign launched, I was sitting in my office, and the account director came in, Rich Rosardi. You might remember Howard.
I remember Rich. Yep.
Rich comes in, he darkens my doorway, and as Rich does, who's always trying to tweak people, he says, "Did you get the email?" And I'm like, No. And I'm like, fuck, it's been 3 weeks. We're dead. They fucking hate it. They're killing it. It's done. My career's over. Whatever. He sits down on my couch. He says, "Go ahead and open it. It's from Kathy." Kathy was our client. She had forwarded an email that had been sent to their customer service team. And that email came from a woman in Dunbar, West Virginia. And the subject line was "Thank you." And the body of the email basically said, me and my 6-year-old daughter pulled into an H&R Block, and my daughter saw the sign and said, "Mom, does this mean we have people?" And the mom said, "Well, yes, as a matter of fact, it does." And the kid went absolutely like apeshit. Like, she was so proud and excited. And it sounds trite, even. It sounds kind of like
No,
no
it
big deal.
doesn't.
This really moved me. I was like, wow. I am behind something that has really brought some joy and happiness to someone's life, and all I'm trying to do is sell tax preparation. Like, what's going on here? And that season, after it ended, and of course, this is implanted in my mind, and I've always wanted to do the kind of work where people go, "Thanks for not wasting my fucking time. That was interesting." Um, that's the best kind of work there can be. So I had this idea of grateful branding or brand gratitude. In fact, I think I might have still been calling it that when we first talked.
Yep.
And I ended up on appreciated branding because it has a kind of a bigger feel to it. But and I also could get the URL. But uh, I always had
That's
this in my
important.
head of this little girl who just felt so empowered and so happy. And so I started thinking, what's going on here? And it comes down to, a lot of companies. I was just looking at some of the ads for the Super Bowl. Uber Eats with McConaughey, perfection.
The best one I've seen so
Perfection.
far.
Starbucks, it's just all they're showing is how to make coffee. It's all around, and they're using that H or that ACDC, song that's been used everywhere. And all they're doing is talking about how they make coffee. It's the rational versus the emotional. And I can make the same parallel to H&R Block, which was when they fired us and got rid of You Got People, their next year was H&R Block, get it right. And their sales went down like a power window. Nobody cared. And this is the crystallization of the idea of appreciated branding, which is companies spend millions to try and interrupt people and get them to care about them. But the best advertising and the best work that you can do is proving that you care about your customer.
Well,
That's where you
let me
get
just
them
interrupt.
involved in the story of the brand.
Let me just interrupt you and ask a question. I mean, there are a lot of marketing books out there. Why do we need another one? What makes your book unique?
Well, I think it's appropriate for the time because we are now getting hit with 10,000 messages a day of companies and entities and whatever asking for our attention. We live in what I call a distraction economy. A lot of these books, Byron Sharp's book, a lot of these other books, they're either all about purpose, purpose-driven marketing, which I think is I get mislabeled as being about that with appreciated branding, and it's not about that. Um, and I think a lot of these books are not really calibrated to the times we live in. The times we live in are, you cannot interrupt me and think I'll give a shit about you. Now, you can do it in a way that I might appreciate, and Uber Eats does that with McConaughey for sure. Keeps my attention, entertaining all the way through, as we always used to try to do. And now I'm thanking you for giving my life that delightful experience. Starbucks, I'm going, yeah, okay, I get it. You put grounds in a thing and you swirl up the milk, and yeah, everybody does that. Caribou does that, Pete's does that. Everybody does that. Who cares? Give me a reason to care about you. That's what appreciated branding is about. And I don't know that anybody else has captured that. A lot of these purpose-based companies say, well, we're going to plant $10 million worth of trees in the Amazon. Great. How does that help me right now? I'm trying to get my baby seat in the car and take the older brother to soccer. And I don't get how you're helping me. You're not. It's nice. It doesn't motivate me to want to buy your product necessarily. If, on the other hand, you go, you know what, we're planting $10 million worth of trees in the neighborhoods where our stores are, and we want to green up and plant trees, and maybe we'll plant one in your yard if you're open to it. That's a thank you. That's like immediately helpful to me. And that's what
Do you
appreciated
think
branding.
people, do you think people will actually buy something because you're planting trees in your neighborhood?
Well, I mean, that's an example. The better example is, I'll give you the example from the book. And this is my favorite example. So, because it's such a consumer packaged good, and consumer packaged goods, the top 5 expenditures for advertising, obviously consumer packaged goods is up there. And advertising expenditures next year are about to pass 1 trillion globally. And my argument is that's not because advertising's working better. It's because advertising isn't working as well. You need a bigger sledgehammer to get people to notice you. And all it's doing is causing frustration and consternation. And, I just want to watch the cat pull down the curtains. Do you have to interrupt my YouTube video or whatever? So I guess the point that I would make is, in India, there's a brand of laundry detergent called Ariel. It's a P&G brand. And in India, there's a competitor named Surf, and it's a Unilever brand. And they had spent years spending millions, one getting a little bit share, the other one coming back and getting that share back, and maybe a little more. And it's a seesaw back and forth, and they're spending millions. And the only ones, and this is not popular for when I talk to agencies, but the only ones making money are the agencies, right? All we're doing is it's like an arms race, and explosions are going all over the place, and the only people making money are the arms dealers. And that's the advertising creators, right? So what Ariel did, and there was a
it's the media agencies, to be fair, that the
okay, yeah, let's say
advertising
that. So
creative agencies are getting screwed out of it. But yeah,
in a similar kind of data point to what I mentioned with Block, Ariel found this data point, which was 95% of the people in India still thought laundry was a woman's job. And Ariel said, gosh, that's a kind of a tension. That's not right. And so they launched a campaign called Share the Load, hashtag Share the Load. They ran it, and guess how much their sales went up?
Well, I remember the statistic. 76%.
76%.
Yeah.
76%. You don't get that from.
You can equate that to this campaign.
Totally. Look at the case study. Look it up on YouTube. Look it up on the Effies. It's huge, huge. And the reason for that is, in my belief, and I know that I'm right, is that the women who buy laundry detergent were like, thank you for the air cover, thank you for advocating for our lives and how hard we got it. And that's all people want is some help.
So is it fair to say, because you mentioned that sometimes your thoughts on appreciated branding are conflated with this purpose-driven marketing that's been going around, that the reason that a brand can be appreciated can be far-reaching. It's not just related to charitable works or good deeds.
Correct.
It can be anything. Like, in my mind, as you were talking, I was thinking about, and we talked a lot about this campaign on the podcast, but the most interesting man in the world for Dos Equis beer, right? Which was a beer that had been around since the mid 80s in the United States, had been imported. And it was just a kind of nowhere brand. They did a little advertising around Cinco de Mayo every year, and it wasn't a brand that was on people's minds. And I think what they got appreciated for was for their comedy, for their levity, and and all of a sudden it was like, oh, and it's a good beer too. Why wouldn't I buy beer from this company that makes me feel good when I see their advertising? It makes me want to write one of their ads and put it online and say, and makes me want to be the most interesting man in the world. So I think that it's about really figuring out how best, and it's going to be different for each. Unlocking that is going to be different for each brand. I mean, that's where the work is, right? Like figuring out, like, where can we credibly deliver something that people will appreciate us for.
Well, and that's one of the points that's worth repeating, I think, is, every category is different. Beer is a badge category. People drink beers because when they hold it up, it's a badge that represents their values or what they care about. No one really had defined. I mean, Bud Light was about funny, but it wasn't intelligent funny. It was just kind of broad funny. Dos Equis came out and said, some really thought-provoking, interesting things. I don't always drink beer, but when I do, I prefer Dos Equis. But
well, that right there, I always thought was brilliant, because it's putting it on a level with whiskey and maybe wine, and say, I don't always drink beer, but when I do, so if you've already accepted that he's the most interesting man in the world, he's this sophisticated guy, and he's telling you, I don't always drink beer, you're thinking, well, this guy's drinking single malt scotch, he's drinking, fine vintages of red wine. And when he does, he drinks Dos Equis. So it's automatically taking that beer out of the beer
It
category
puts a
with
bit of a halo on the beer. Yeah,
yeah.
for sure.
So,
Yeah.
so Reid, would you agree then when Bud Light goes off and tries to connect with a trans spokesperson that it was getting in way over its head?
Oh, I wouldn't say it was getting way over its head. I think it was one of the biggest bungles in the history of marketing.
Well, that's
You
okay.
know?
We're saying the same thing in different words, but
Yeah,
yeah,
just
it
yeah,
blew up in
they're
their
getting over their head
faces.
because what they're doing is they're not even they're the core Bud straight white male beer drinker gives no shits about LGBTQ. And that's not me saying I don't care about it.
No,
I
I get
do,
it. We
but
get it.
it's not Bud Light's place to try and save them from, whatever. It's just not.
So appreciated
So
branding
know
is
your
not the same
lane.
as
That's the lesson there.
appreciated.
Lane.
Appreciated branding is not about or not connected with purpose-driven advertising from your perspective.
Well, it depends on what you'd call purpose-driven advertising, and that's another issue that I mean, I don't know if it came out yet, but I wrote a newsletter about that. I don't know when that one's coming out, but people equate purpose-driven advertising with either Tom Shoes, the business exists because whenever you buy a pair of shoes, we give another pair to someone who needs them, or it's social cause advertising. So we want to, we're going to do something to help promote children's cancers or whatever, and by virtue of osmosis, you're going to think better of our brand. Probably not. Or it's like the Patagonias of the world who exist to help make the environment a better place. Great purpose, great, but you're never going to re-engineer a company that's been around to be a Patagonia. But what you can do is find ways to proactively solve problems that haven't been solved for people, as long as they're adjacent to your category and relevant to the people you're trying to attract. And that's where Bud Light went wrong. LGBTQ has no relevance to Bud Light drinkers. They don't care. So if you're going to do something purposeful or something to help Bud Light drinkers, make it fit with their worldview, right? So like if you think about this Coors Case of the Mondays thing that's coming out, one of the jokes they had was the cold can roller, so you could cool yourself off when you're hungover or after the game, and you put the can between this plastic thing, and that's fun, but it's also a thank you. Oh, you thought of a problem that could that would help me, and that's where you get that goodwill back at the brand, and that's the whole point of appreciated branding, is creating that connection. And the appreciation also, when you think about Dos Equis, the appreciation can come from the cultural currency that comes from being in the know about a certain campaign. So when you see that meme with the man, or I was thinking the most interesting man in the world, and he's wrestling an alligator or something, and it's just like, I don't always wrestle alligators, but when I do, there's a beer on the line or something. I don't know. That's like a horrible. The way these were written were so much better. But though you're the one that sees that first, and you can share it with your friends. Dos Equis gets a big thank you. It's not said out loud, but it's felt.
Yeah, I think that's a very high bar, and that's what's brilliant about that campaign is that the advertising itself is kind of the reward. I think the Geico stuff early on, particularly with the cavemen when that launched, I think was in that realm as well. It was like it was in the cultural currency. You wanted to see the next spot because you knew it was going to be fun and you knew it was going to be worth a chuckle.
Yeah.
And it was the way, Adam Carolla talks about, you put the medication for the dog in the Gainsburger so that he'll eat it, right? Well, the humor of those Geico commercials was the Gainsburger to swallow the pill of you could save money on your car insurance,
Yeah.
which isn't a
Yeah.
very entertaining proposition.
Well, they're going to get more attention if they do something people can appreciate watching. Appreciated branding. I can appreciate when you have, what was the one that my kids and I talked about so much? It was Marco Polo in the pool, right? That was a Geico spot. I don't remember that one. I mean, they had hundreds of them. The
You,
Geico one, the best one was the pre-roll where they come on, they go, you can't skip this ad. It's already over. And the dog, and all the actors just freeze, and the dog climbs up on the table and licks the spaghetti. I mean, it's just freaking brilliant. Thank you, Geico. Thank you. You
you,
not only did you keep my attention, but you entertained me.
having this.
That's the point. I mean, we haven't done enough entertainment in what we're doing, and I think that's the argument. One of the arguments against the purpose-driven advertising that's, I think, infected a lot of the stuff that's in our business today. People, and I've read, we've talked to Steve Harrison and we've talked to Nick Asbury about their books and their arguments against purpose-driven advertising, is that too many of us in our industry, especially in the coast, are embarrassed to be called advertising people, because what we do is entertain. That's our job, is to entertain, to make a brand famous.
I think it's worth, I don't think they're embarrassed because it's entertaining. I think they're embarrassed because they're selling stuff. And
well, okay,
and
that's
that
we're saying the same thing.
Selling stuff is not seen as a higher order calling in our society right now. But just as we were talking, this could be an example, I would guess, of appreciated branding, and it's a brand that people always use all the time when it comes to the best of advertising. But Apple with the iPod, there was a period of time where every iPod commercial kind of unveiled to the American public a new band with a killer song, and that made me appreciate, it's like, hey, Jet, are you going to go my way? Like things like that. All of a sudden, it's like every time I saw one of those Apple commercials, I knew they were going to turn me on to something really good when it came to music. So I think the point is there's a lot of different ways to gain that appreciation. It's not about, one specific route.
Yeah. I would also add, Howard, to your question, why is this relevant today? I would make the argument, and I have been making the argument lately in the keynotes I've been giving, and I don't think I put this too fine a point on this in the book, but the more I go through this process of thinking about this and this solution, and this is the way to kind of really advertise and market, the unique selling proposition is outdated. It's a rational request. It's a rational thing in categories where there are way too many problems that solve the same, or too many solutions for the same problem. So let's talk about laundry detergent. Go stand in Walmart in the laundry detergent aisle. There's 50 brands. They all solve the same problem. How can each of them have a unique selling proposition? And how can any of them be compelling enough to any large enough piece of the market that it would really substantially change their fortunes? That's where I go, I think what we need is a unique appreciated solution. Something where you're creating a reason for consumers to pay attention to you because you understand them, you understand their values, you understand problems that have not been addressed that you can help fix. Like, why do moms always have to do all the laundry? That's what appreciated branding is all about. And if we can make that the aspiration, you break through, because you're, as I say in the book, you're appealing to people on a values channel, not on some media channel. You're connecting with them on something they already value and think about. If you can put your brand on that channel, you're going to get a lot more attention, and you're going to get a lot more appreciation and a lot more business.
So let's just take as an example, there's a spot out now that's getting a lot of attention, at least on LinkedIn. It's the story spot for Lay's potato chips, with this little girl who grabs a spud and plants it and watches it grow. And System 1 did its testing of it. System 1 is an AI generator, I think an AI assisted software that measures the emotional response, the emotional taglines of the communication, and it's gone through the roof. It's done really positive on System 1 testing, and it's a cute story. It's a memorable story. It's a fun story. Is that an example of appreciated branding? Or, I mean, maybe I'm being too cynical. People buy Lay's potato chips because they taste good. And is that spot going to have any impact on whether they think that the potato chips taste good or not? Because there's an old line in our business. There's an old line in our business. The best way to kill a bad product is with good advertising. So if you
think about what the point of advertising is, you're never going to, you can show tasty stuff and whet people's appetites and stuff like that. That's all rational. That's a rational appeal. Emotional appeals hook people into a story. So what they did with that spot is they opened a story loop. And the story loop opened when that potato fell off the back of that thing. Quite honestly, I don't know which one they tested because I saw the 30 and I was like, oh, this is almost there. It's just not, or maybe it was the 60. It just felt like the story was not streamlined enough for me to really appreciate it. And I saw the 30 or the six, I'm sorry, it was a 3 minute. It was a 3 minute version
Yeah.
online.
It's a long,
And
short
I was
film.
like, now I mean, that you've got the cuts of the little girl dancing around the plant, and you've got the beginning where they're all in the kitchen before they go walking out to deliver the potatoes. And there was much more story involved there, and that was much more engaging and much more compelling to me. So how this will perform in the game is a question. It'll probably get some good response because it's a nice little story in a sea of what will probably be a lot of goofy joke type stuff.
So I think th- and I've got a couple of thoughts that I'm going to connect together. One is I think a lot of the great advertising that we've come to recognize as great advertising wasn't created because they necessarily had a formula for this is going to be great advertising. They just felt, well, this is a good idea, and later we can retrospectively say, well, what's making these great ads great, right? And because the holy grail is to figure out how to do this on a on a on an ongoing basis, which leads me to this Lay's potato chip. If this Lay's, and I haven't seen it, but if this Lay's potato chip ad moves the needle emotionally, it would be the first time for me that a Lay's potato chip ad ever moved the needle emotionally. The question then becomes, where do they go from there? And do they create a brand that consistently gets people to think, oh yeah, that's what something I want to feel, I want to be associated with, and I think that that's what creates the appreciation. One time lightning strike isn't going to make you change your mind about a brand or have that brand be omnipresent in your mind for the next, the campaigns we've talked about have been long ongoing campaigns. The Most Interesting Man in the World, the various Geico campaigns that kind of keep delivering in terms of why you might appreciate, at least in that narrow thing of appreciating the advertising. And I don't want to have people come away from this podcast thinking that that's the narrow scope through which you're talking about brand
No,
appreciation.
no, no. And I appreciate you pointing that out. But here's the thing I'll say about that spot. They're telling a story, an emotional story. And the other thing I found myself watching was, gosh, I hope this is real. I hope this is true. And the way they end the spot is with actual photos of actual farmers. So what they're doing, who grow their potatoes. So what they're doing is they're pulling the veil away and saying, we're not just some mass produced, there are families behind these chips that you eat. There are people who grow these things for us, and they are actual human beings. And that as a strategic place to live for that brand is brilliant because it's just this big corporate brand where you don't know the provenance of the stuff you shove in your mouth. And this gives it to you. And that's where I was as I was watching that spot, I was like, oh, I hope this isn't just some
Well,
execution that ends with something like Lay's, whatever. They actually showed some of these families and these little girls where you're kind of going, I wonder if that story is based on that little girl because it looked like just an iPhone picture.
it's brilliant. Maybe it is brilliant. Maybe it isn't. The jury is out. We don't know whether that's going to translate into anything remotely close to increased sales. Will it make them feel better about the brand? I don't know. I mean,
Well, you
I'm
have to
playing.
the journey of 1,000 miles starts with a first step. And
Yes,
so the
yes,
question is,
exactly.
if they create an ad that kind of stirs something in people, then great. Then now you got to do it again, and you got to do it again. I think, Reid, it was funny because as you were mentioning that, I thought, and again, I haven't seen the spot. I thought they took a page out of the Five Guys playbook. I don't know if you have Five Guys in
Oh my God, they're everywhere.
yeah,
They're like
but
Starbucks now.
but yeah, but when they first kind of arrive in your town, it's kind of very quaint, like the way that it's set up, and they have these little cutouts of the reviews from like the little local newspaper, like the local, Village Voice, whatever, from different towns. But the curious thing is when you go up to order, you say today's potatoes are from, and it says the town in Idaho or Utah or wherever. And it's kind of that idea of, this is real food. No matter
Yeah.
what else you
Yeah.
take away,
Yeah.
what you're going to put in your mouth today is real food.
I would bet that's been part of the reason that Five Guys has done so well, because they're not cheap. My God.
No, no, they're the
But
most expensive burger you can get,
but if
basically,
they
here in
can
Miami.
justify that cost with, we source our food from, from
Real
farmers
farmers.
in America, that's a big deal. The other thing I would mention in terms of that spot, Howard, is think of the audiences that will see that. You've got people who want to buy chips and who will appreciate the provenance of the chips they get in a Lay's bag. Then you've got all the people who grow for Lay's across the country who are going to watch that commercial and go, "Hey, I'm one of those guys. I'm one of those growers." You never know. One of their kids might go, "Hey, Dad, don't we grow for Lay's?" "Yep, we do." "Oh, wow. That makes me feel good." And so that's a really critical audience. Not only that, but the people who make and distribute Lay's. I mean, so there's a lot more than just trying to inspire. Clearly you have to inspire purchase, right? But there's a lot more audiences that benefit from this kind of stuff than just the self-serving notion of buy my stuff. And that's when I say you can spend a ton of money trying to get me to care about you, or you can spend a lot less proving that you care about me. That makes more
I,
impact.
I think you have a powerful argument, Reid, when you say that these kind of taglines and these kinds of stories can help build up morale for the people who work in these companies. And it'll be an interesting test to see what the residual effect will be on a spot like that for the people who grow relays. Let me pivot and ask you, I remember the build up to the launch of your book, and there's a lot of positive response. You got it was had a huge impact on Amazon. What's been the impact when you're out on the road talking about your book? How do people feel about the message of your book?
Um, I'm getting attention because I think people are looking for there's a few things. Number one, if you're in marketing now and all you're doing is chasing transactions with data, you're not having any fun. You're pissing a lot of people off. Um, it's a people are starting to realize, and I just wrote another another newsletter about this. There was a discussion I saw, and I wrote up a newsletter about it, which is like if we don't start respecting people's privacy and their data, we're shooting our marketing selves in the foot, because it's just going to get ignored and ignored and ignored. And the only solution is when every problem looks like a nail, all a hammer's the only tool you need. So they up the budget. We need to, like we need to up the budget. You don't have to do that. If you can appeal to people's interests and the things they care about, whether that's being entertained, whether that's knowing the provenance of their product, whether that's giving them some air cover and making their life easier without saying it's because of your product, but it can be because of the message that you put in the marketplace. Those are very powerful ways to break through clutter. Those are very powerful ways to appeal to the people who you're trying to get to care about you. And again, prove you care about it's like it's any kind of relationship. You prove you care about me and I will care more about you. So
Are you planning on being, let me ask this again. Do you have any upcoming speaking engagements that you want to tell us about?
I just had one in Kansas City with a bunch of real estate folks. I had one in Phoenix um, last week, and then the week before I talked to the consumer business group at 3M. I have one coming up for a constituency up in Canada. Hopefully, they'll still want to talk to an American. um, but that's coming up. I've got a big one in May with a ad holding company, not one of the biggies, but a good size ad holding company. They're going to have me in and talk, and I'm always looking for more. So if anybody wants to hear this keynote about how to break through more effectively and do some good for the people you want to attract, that's what my keynote's all about.
Reid Holmes, author of Appreciated Branding and an old friend, thank you for coming back and talking about your book. It was great to see you.
Likewise, Howard, always a pleasure. And
Good stuff, Henry.
Good stuff, Howard.
He's Henry Gomez.
He's Howard Eibach, and together we're the Brief Brothers. Till next time, bye bye.
Bye bye.